So I know you guys aren't going to read this on your own, so I'm making a video, so you have to learn all about Caecilius, which is the man, the father of the family that this book is about, and he was a real person. So Caecilius lived in Italy during the first century AD in the town of Pompeii, which of course is famous for the volcano Vesuvius. The town was situated at the foot of Mount Vesuvius on the coast of the Bay of Naples. So if you have Italy right here and you zoom in to Pompeii, okay, Mount Vesuvius here, Pompeii here, and this was the Bay of Naples right in front of it. And it may have had a population of about 10,000 people. So it was a pretty decent sized city for back then. Caecilius was a rich banker in Pompeii, and when archaeologists excavated his house, they discovered that he had a strong box with his accounts in it. And these documents tell us that he was also an auctioneer, a tax collector, a farmer, and a money lender. So he gave people loans. He inherited some of his money from his father, Lucius Caecilius Felix, but he probably made most of it through shrewd and energetic business activities. His business dealings were in slaves, cloth, timber, and in property. He also ran a cleaning and dyeing business. He grazed sheep and cattle on pastures outside the town, and he sometimes won contracts for collecting local taxes. So he'd be paid by the town to collect the taxes. He also may have owned a few shops and probably lent money to local shipping companies that wanted to trade with countries overseas. The profit on such trading was often very large. Caecilius's full name was Lucius Caecilius Iucundus. Lucius was his personal name, like a modern first name. His second name, Caecilius, shows that he was a member of the clan of Caecilii. And clans or groups of families were very important, and strong feelings of loyalty existed within them. Caecilius's third name, Iucundus, is the name of his own family and close relatives. So basically what you have here with his name, Lucius Caecilius. Isn't this working? Where's my mouse at? Okay, my mouse is gone. Well, anyway, Lucius was what you would call him, what his friends would call him. And Caecilius means that there's like a large extended family that would have a name. So it was the big extended family or clan of Caecili. And then his immediate family were the Iucundus family. The word Jucundus means pleasant, just as in English we find surnames like Pleasance or Jolly. So he was Mr. Pleasant. And his father's name was Lucius Caecilius Felix, and Felix means happy. So only a Roman citizen would have three names. A slave would have just one, such as Clemens or Grumio. And as a citizen, Caecilius not only had the right to vote in elections, but he was also fully protected by the law against unjust treatments, which is not the case with slaves. The slaves who lived and worked in his house and in his businesses would have had no rights of their own. They were his property, and he could treat them as well or as badly as he wished. There was one important exception to this rule. The law did not allow a master to put a slave to death without showing good reason. So you can see in these pictures, the first picture is the front of Caecilius's house, and that was his front door. The spaces on either side of the door were shops. They would have had doors, but again, this was blown up by Mount Vesuvius, so not a lot of it's left standing. But he would have had shops. That was very typical for Roman villas. The statue of a head was found in his house, and it might have been a portrait of him, although they did find a different name inscribed on it, so some people believe that might be his grandfather. The next picture is a wooden tablet that was found in his house. These tablets recorded his business dealings, so these were like his files for his paperwork. The writing was on wax in central recesses, so like uh, little areas inside the wood. They would have put wax in there so that you could write on it. And when the tablets were discovered, a lot of the writing could still be read. and the tablets were tied together in twos or threes through the holes on the top. So basically, they were like book covers, and inside, instead of paper, there was wax. So this big box here, he kept his tablets and his money in a wood and metal strong box, such as this. This one's in better shape, so they didn't show his that he actually owned, but that's about what it would have looked like. And then the page at the very bottom was one page of writing, and it records his sale at an auction for a slave for 6,252 sesterces. All right, so let's learn about his wife Metella. Roman women of all classes had much greater personal freedom than women in other parts of the Mediterranean. Caecilius's wife Metella, like many Roman wives and mothers, had an important position in her home. She was responsible for the efficient and economical management of the household. She supervised the work of the domestic slaves. So she was the boss at home. In order to run the house successfully, she would need to be well organized and firm but sensitive in her control of the slaves. Although complete equality of the sexes was never an issue in ancient Rome, the Roman wife often had considerable power, influence, and freedom of behavior. She enjoyed her husband's confidence, and she was his companion and his helper. She shared his authority over the children and slaves. She shared responsibility for the religious cult of the family. She prepared for social occasions, and she helped to welcome guests. She also dined next to her husband at banquets, which is a practice that the Greeks would have condemned as disgraceful. Greek women did not have as much freedom as Roman women would have. So she played a part in his career if it took him on a tour of duty. So if he went off to war, then she would help. Um, if he went on a tour of for politics, like if she was married to a politician, she would have um, assisted with him. And for Caecilius, since he was a businessman, he might have gone to the different Roman provinces to do business, and she would have helped with that as well. Unlike women in Greece or the Near East, Roman women were not required to live in seclusion in the home, so they could go out and live their lives. Although their lives did center on the home, Roman women of all classes went out to shop, to exchange visits with friends, to go to the baths, which was an important part of Roman life. They liked to bathe, so they were very clean people. They went to worship at the temples, they attended public events in the theater or amphitheater, and to accompany their husbands to banquets where they took a well-informed part in social and literary conversation. So they were expected to be smart and well-educated. We know of women who were cooks, bakers, weavers, hairdressers, shoemakers, silversmiths, midwives, and doctors. Occasionally, women were also engaged in business, and often such women were widows who took over control of their husband's affairs after he died. One influential Pompeian businesswoman was Eumachia. That's who the statue is. She was a public priestess and a patroness of the powerful cloth workers and merchants. She inherited money from her father, who owned a brick-making business. It was her donation of money that built the large meeting hall of the cloth trade in Pompeii. All right, let's learn about some houses in Pompeii. So, the town house in which a wealthy man like Caecilius lived differed in several ways from an equivalent house today. The house came right up to the sidewalk. There's no garden or grass in front of it. The windows were very few of them. They were small. They were placed fairly high. They were intended to let in light, but to keep out the heat of the sun. Large windows would have made the rooms uncomfortably hot in the summer and cold in the winter. Some houses stood only 1 story high, others had a second floor. On either side of the front door, many houses had shops, like the one Caecilius had, and these were rented out by the owner of the house to other people, or they might have ran their own shops from it. From the outside, with its few windows and high walls, the house didn't look very attractive or inviting. The ground plan of the house shows two parts or areas of about equal size. So if you look at the chart below, there's like two, or the picture below, there's two big squares, roughly equal in size. They look like courtyards surrounded by rooms opening off the central space. So the main entrance to the house was on the side facing the street. So if you would have walked past through the door. The Yanua, the was the like entrance. So the visitor would come into this short corridor, which led directly into the main room, which is the atrium, or what we would call an atrium. This impressive room was used for important family occasions and for receiving visitors. In the middle, the roof sloped down slightly towards a large square opening called the compluvium. Air and light streamed in through this opening high overhead, and immediately below that was the impluvium, a marble-lined, shallow, rectangular pool that collected rainwater, which was then stored in a cistern for household use. So it was a cool opening. You went through the door, and you would walk into an entryway, the Ianua, and then it would open up into this really pretty big room with a an opening in the roof that let in rain and sunshine, and underneath of that there was a pool, the impluvium, and that collected all the rainwater. One of the most striking things about the atrium was the sense of space. The high roof, with the glimpse of the sky through the central opening, the large floor area, and the absence of much furnishing all helped to give this impression. The furniture that was in there would include a bronze or marble table, a couch, and maybe the strong box where the family valuables were stored. In a corner near the main door, there was the Yararium, a small shrine at which the family gods were worshipped. The floor of the atrium was paved with marble slabs or with mosaics, and the walls were decorated with panels of brightly painted plaster. The Pompeians were especially fond of red, orange, and blue. And on many of these panels, there were scenes from well-known stories, especially the Greek myths. Around the atrium, there would be bedrooms, the study, and the dining room. The entrances to these rooms were usually provided not with a wooden door, but with a heavy curtain. So with these pictures, the small picture was the atrium or the atrium in Caecilius's house, as it is today. So they are currently still digging it out from the rubble of Pompeii, and it's pretty destroyed. So you can see the impluvium at the bottom, but there's no walls or roof. But we can see how spacious it was. And next to it, the bigger picture is a someone else's villa that is much better preserved. So you can see basically what it would have looked like. So you have the compluvium at the top that would have let in the rain and sunshine, and the impluvium below, which is still to this day collecting that rain. And then the entryway is their front door. So from this first area of the house, the visitor walked either um, through into the tablinum, the study, or through a narrow passage into the second part of the house, which was the peristilium, which was made up of a colonnade of pillars surrounding the hortus, the garden. So if you look back at this picture, okay, so you have the atrium, and then immediately after that, you would walk into the tablinum, or you could walk past that into the peristylu and the hortus. Okay, so you have the big garden area right there. And uh, so, like the atrium, the colonnade, peristylum, the big columns in the picture below, was often elaborately decorated. Around the outside of the colonnade were the summer dining room, the kitchen, the toilet, the slaves' quarters, and storage rooms. Some houses even had their own sets of baths. The garden, the hortus, was laid out with flowers and shrubs in a careful plan, and in the small fish pond in the middle, a fountain threw up a jet of water. So it would have been a really nice, peaceful place to hang out. In the peristylum, the members of the family enjoyed the sunshine or shade as they wished, and they relaxed on their own or they entertained their guests. The Pompeians not only lived in houses that looked very different from modern ones, but also thought very differently about them. They did not expect their houses to be private places restricted to the family and close friends. Instead, the master conducted much of his business and social life right from home. He would receive and do business with most visitors in the atrium. The most important ones would be invited into the tablinum. Certain very close business friends and high-ranking individuals would receive invitations to dine in the triclinium, or relax in the peristelium with the family. Only the wealthy lived like this. Poor people lived in much simpler homes. Some of the poorer shopkeepers would have had only one single room or maybe two above their shops. In large cities such as Rome, many people lived in insulae, which are apartment buildings that were several stories, even up to 6 stories high, and some of them were in very poor condition. So these are some various houses. Um, Painting of they loved painting like nature portraits on the walls, and they liked three-dimensional things that would make the room look bigger. In the lower left-hand corner, you have this table, which was a common three-legged table. This one was in the tablinum of the house of Paquius Proculus. And then on the bottom right is the lavarium, which is the shrine that they would have their household gods in. Okay, so here's some work for you to do. Um, so this is trying to understand the Latin roots of English. So in the stage one vocabulary checklist, which you'll find at the end of the chapter, find the Latin word from which these words are derived. So where do we get the word surf from? These are all modern English words. And what Latin word do they come from? What Latin word does patrician come from? Elaborate, concoct, culinary, etc. So in B, match each definition with one of the words given below. So these are some English words and that are based on Latin. So what do those mean, and can you tell which Latin words did they come from? Okay, and that's it for that chapter. So do your homework, and we'll go on to chapter 2 next.